I have my slew of shirts and things, and I'm like, all right, different video. Let me put on a different shirt or a different top or whatever.
Yeah.
You know, put on different earrings. I got my earrings over here, you know, like.
Everyone, this is Connecting the Dots. My name is Ignacio and I am the host of Connecting the Dots. Today I am here with
Marla Renee Stewart. I am a bald-headed, Black, cisgender, non-disabled femme who is a sexologist and sex coach and educator, and founder of Velvet Lips and co-founder of the Sex Down South Conference.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Marla is my friend, and I'm very, very happy for her to be joining today. We were going back and forth and trying to figure out what we wanted to do, Connecting the Dots on, and then finally we came to I May Destroy You. This was something that I kind of held back to watch for a little bit because, you know, anything around survivorship was, you know, I have to think about watching it prior to see if it's going to be triggering, but I kept hearing from people that it was something really worth watching. And so I May Destroy You is an HBO series that only had one season, unfortunately, because it was freaking amazing. And it is written, and the leading star is Michaela Coel, the star of Chewing Gum, a British actress, beautiful, talented actress. And she plays in this show, Arabella. And so I May Destroy You is this series about a woman, Arabella, who is a writer or like a up and coming writer, working with editors. She is a party girl, and one night something happens, right? So Marla, you want to kick us off, and like what came up for you when you watched this? Was it good? Was it riveting? Was it like, what was it about it that caught your attention?
So it was really interesting. Actually, I love her. I love Michaela Coel, and I really love Chewing Gum, and I really love her like comedic expression. And so when Tia was like, "Yo, you need to see May I Destroy You," Tia, my business partner, I was like, oh yes, I gotta see it. And it was interesting because for me, it was like, okay, I'm gonna see her in a more serious role, which I don't think I was necessarily prepared for, but also ready for, because I love to see sort of comedic people stretch into like more serious roles to see how, like, I don't know, well they do, I guess. I don't know. So and the fact that she wrote it, and I saw a story even before I saw I May Destroy You. I saw an article about sort of her struggle with, you know, getting it on Netflix, or, you know, trying to get some kind of you know, equity in her movie, you know, some. And so I was very thrilled to actually watch it. And I'm one of those binger people, so I was hoping that like all the episodes were there, but I think I was like halfway through the season when it like stopped, and I was like, wait, what? Where's the next episode? And realized that it was being released, you know, weekly. So, but I really, really enjoyed it. It had some really great like nuances when I was thinking about sort of survivorship and sort of psychological, emotional, physical things that happen. And I liked it a lot. And I liked how, you know me, it's like I liked how it sort of played with your mind a bit. I think that was also pretty thrilling for me because it was different than most other shows that I've seen recently.
Yeah. There were a lot of things that were different about it that I really, really liked, especially as a show that was highlighting stuff around survivorship or trauma or sexual trauma. There's usually like this kind of formula of how we see these stories kind of play out. And this one, for a variety of reasons, was different. And for those who haven't watched I May Destroy You, watch it. This is all spoilers, so come back and then see our analysis later. But the event that happens to Arabella is that she is sexually assaulted in a bathroom stall one night, but she's completely drunk and has hardly any memory of it, and little flashes keep coming back. So she's trying to piece these memories back together while navigating, trying to finish her book, and also just dealing with life and relationships, right? And so, you know, this is the thing that, number one, of course, that mostly the entire cast is Black. That's a number one. That, you know, it was like, wow, beautiful, beautiful. And I think probably 95% people of color, mostly Black. And then also that that it was a story about a person that we would consider a bad survivor. She is not a perfect survivor. You know, we see this party girl drinking, drugging, hanging out, having multiple lovers. This is what most people would call, like, you put into question, what were you doing? You know, how did you, you know, like
Contribute to
contribute?
the situation.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly. And so that I loved. I loved that that this story was about her, a reality that this idea of like good and bad survivors, or who is worthy for healing and or justice, not the same things. Um, yeah, so I love the characters. I love that, and it's interesting to talk about it as characters because this is her life, right? And this is like her friends, right? And so the gay man Kwame is her friend, and then Terry, a heterosexual woman, right? Is she heterosexual?
Yes.
I think she's heterosexual, and then there is Simon. Is it Simon? Yes, Simon, her friend who is married and is trying to get a three-way with this other person. Oh, and then there's Theo. I almost forgot, the person who she meets at the, or she knows actually from childhood, that runs the group for survivors, the white woman, right? So the list of characters or real people here are, it's real, basically, because it is, you know, it's real. And I really like that she did not sweeten herself in this role. Like she really showed her fucking beautiful lunacy in you know, the world she's trying to navigate. Like, she didn't try to make it any different, and which I really appreciated, because a lot of us as survivors are afraid to talk about those things that others wouldn't see as right or moral, and they always integrate that or kind of mesh that in with reasons of sexual assault or violence, you know, perpetrated against us. So those are the things that kind of first came out for me. And thinking about the thread of the topics here, three things came up for me here. It was basically relationships in general, survivorship, and then consent. Because consent is consistently brought up throughout in different scenarios in different ways. That's also how I love, because it didn't solely concentrate on Bella, right?
Right.
It concentrated on other things that happened around consent. So those are the three main things for me.
Yeah, I really liked, I liked that, like even the aspects of consent and thinking about like Kwame's situation, you know, and like to even, that was even sort of put on the sideline, you know, of like, hey, and just all the ickiness, I don't know how to call it, the ickiness of it all, you know, when after reporting it, after, you know, all of these things were just really, for me, what came up is like the self-preservation piece. Like, what are you doing to be resilient from all of these things that have traumatized you or traumatize you? And so you see that with Bella, you see that with her, like going on social media and being like, yeah, like using her fame to, you know, be a voice, and really trying to, you know, overcome all of these other psychological, emotional, physical effects that she's having, you know, from the rape. So yeah,
you said a bunch of things there, like so this resiliency, or ways that we try to heal, right? So I want to talk about Kwame and that, but first with Arabella, you know, like doing her social media stuff. But she's also struggling and dealing with, and you see this throughout, racism, right? Because like in her in the what is it, the agency that's trying to publish her book, the two white people there and how they deal with her and talk with her and handle her. And then when she comes in to have that meeting with, what was it, I think she's the head of Henny House,
Oh
a
yeah.
black woman, right? She was like totally, they were both shocked that they were both black. That
Yeah.
scene really like important because it was just like, she was like, oh my God, they got a black woman. And she
Yes.
was like, yeah. And so like the struggle, and then that woman understanding her, but also in another scene, you also see that her power doesn't matter if she's black, because she was like, can you help me out and can you do this? She's like, no, girlfriend, sorry. She's like,
Right.
you got to do it just like everybody else, you know. So it's interesting around like the different dynamics of oppression and or power, from race to class in that, which was really interesting. Um, but Kwame, that situation, that was really, both situations, both sexual attacks were really rough for me to even witness, which was funny
Mm,
because with Arabella, it was just a quick memory. And it
right.
was like right at the end of the first episode where she just like flashes back, and that little memory alone fucked me up. It just like
Mm,
fucked me. It was like, because it was so real how those images just like fucking boom, pop in your head, and it just derails everything. So in that moment, that was like really rough. But then in Kwame's case, it that was another instance where here's another bad survivor. Here's a gay man who likes to use apps and loves sex, right? And loves anonymous sex. So, ooh, horrible person, right? So we're seeing
mm-hmm.
him as this promiscuous person, and then he tries to, they try to do this three-way, right? So there's three of them in this guy's house, and you know, the three-way doesn't happen, but Kwame ends up having consensual sex with this guy. They're done, it's over, Kwame's about to leave, and in that moment, the guy grabs Kwame and rapes him, and that's definitely not consensual, right? So then we see where that line is blurred right there. So people are like, well, I had sex with him just like 10 minutes ago. Is this rape if I had sex with him, right? It's like, yes, it is rape, you know. So we talk about that, those lines, and how we always wonder, it's
Yeah.
consent.
So it's so interesting that you saw it that way. Like you saw it
Mm-hmm.
as a potential threesome. I actually didn't see it that way. I
Mm-hmm.
actually saw it as Kwame going into this sort of whatever, you know, grinder tender situation or whatever, and having the other guy that he was walking with or seemed like on a date with kind of observing. So for me, it felt like, okay, maybe you've never experienced this before, because it seemed like he was a guy who was like, I'm curious, you know, about being with another man, but I don't know what that looks like or feels like. And so it felt like, okay, well, this is what it looks like. Like it feels like Kwame's like, I'm gonna teach you what it looks like, you know. And he was like, you know, actually maybe it's not my thing because I don't want to see you with other people. So it really felt almost monogamous minded,
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
very much like, oh, I don't want to share you with
Mhm.
other people. That doesn't feel good to me. And so, and you know, he ends up leaving. And so that's what it kind of, what came up for me was sort of like the non-monogamy versus monogamy, you know, curiosity sort of thing.
Right. Oh, that's a great point. Yes, because really we are looking at Kwame as like, is he boyfriend material? Because then there's this guy that seems so sweet and so like, you know, innocent and wanting
And
something
you feel
deeper.
for him, you know,
Right.
you're like,
Right.
oh,
But then that make Kwame a bad guy, right? And then for him to be raped, it's almost like, well, you know, so if the other guy would have been raped, that question wouldn't be brought up, right? And this is the way we think about sexual survivors of sexual violence. I think almost the only times we think about like what the victim, you know, what the victim was doing or something.
mm-hmm.
Um, yeah. So thank you for that perspective. Yes, I think you're right. I think that is a big piece of it. Because we're thinking about all the ways in which people are having relationships, which brings me back to that thread. I'm thinking about all the ways they have relationships, like Simon and his a partner. I don't know if that was his wife or girlfriend, right? They seem to have this happy, beautiful relationship. And then they're talking about opening it up to a three-way. They meet this woman, you know, the wife is all for it. She wants to have this three-way, right? And then you find out that this is all like a ruse. It's all a fucking ruse because he's already fucking that girl, and that girl was just curious to meet his partner, just to see what she was about. And that's a whole conversation about relationships, about trust, about honesty, about like, why is this guy doing this? Like, it's so fucked. It's so fucked. It's such a violation, you know, like, so I'm like, what kind of a thing, what kind of a relationship is he trying to create here, you know, or destroy really? And then the relationships between Arabella and her homegirl, Arabella and Kwame, the three of them together, how they take care of each other, how they show up for one another, you know, all of
I
that.
love that. I loved seeing their friendship. I loved seeing the ups and downs. I loved seeing how, you know, even in sort of like that triad sort of friendship, how like secrets were kept just because they didn't want to hurt. You know, I know Terry and Kwame like keeping the secret from Arabella, like how like these dynamics in this such close relationship was super important for that self-preservation piece, or ensuring or trying to ensure that they were healing in some way, shape, or form. So I felt like Terry was definitely the go-between between Bella and Kwame as far as navigating those experiences. And then it's like, you know, like seeing that friendship and then seeing how she was like so, I don't know, I guess empowered, you know, having that threesome with those two guys, and you're like, yeah. And then later on finding out like, wait a minute, like they planned that, or it's possible that they planned it, and like having her own set of issues, and like who is she going to turn to when she knows these other two people are being affected. So for me, it was like, it was one of those like, not only are you trying to take care and nurture your friends, but how are you nurturing and taking care of yourself? So
right. That, oh yes, I totally forgot about that, because that's also talks about consent, right? Because when she thought she was in control of that situation, when she was on the dance floor and this fine guy is dancing with her, then he goes to get a drink and another fine guy comes, and then they're like fighting for, not fighting, but like saying, hey, you know, we both want her, how do we fix this? And then they're all together. That seems very empowering. She's like, I decided this. And then to find that they manipulated her, it shifts everything, right? And so then is that consent because she didn't have all the information? You know, like, it's really interesting to think about that, like, and she felt disempowered. And so, and then we have Arabella, who was in a drunken or spiked state and was sexually assaulted, and then Kwame, who was in a you know, a hookup situation and then was raped, and then her not having proper information and her agency being taken away. 3 different ways of being, you know, sexually traumatized or sexually assaulted. And even within their friendships, they gave value to each of those, right? Staying quiet and saying, well, mine is not that as important as this one, right? Which is interesting, which a lot of us do. It's like, oh, mine's isn't as bad, right? Saying that that even though I've experienced this trauma, it just goes below yours. And then we have these 3 friends that are experiencing so many different things and similar things at the same time. Yeah, and it feels good when it comes to the point where they all like realize, they come back to themselves, and they what's her name? Terry releases the guilt, and Kwame has told them that he was also raped, and now they're supporting one another and everything. But another point of consent violation is Zane, the freaking guy who worked at the.
Oh my gosh. Yes.
What? Oh my God.
Yes.
Like, please tell us about that. Tell us about Zane.
Oh my gosh. So yeah, with Zane, I mean, my jaw dropped, right? Like, and so yeah, for folks who are just kind of like tuning in or whatever, it's sort of like that she consents to having sex, Arabella consents to having sex with Zane. They are like, I believe like in missionary position or something like that. He has a condom on, you know, everything. Okay, they want to switch positions, doggy style. And during the switching of positions, he takes the condom off, throws it on the ground, and, you know, proceeds with sex. Um, and Bella, you know, after sex is done, right, or he comes or whatever, she looks and sees the condom on the ground and is like, what? Wait a minute. And he's like, oh, you know, he would play nice guy, right? Like, oh, you know, when we switched positions, I thought you saw me do it. Like, oh, I thought you didn't, you know, you didn't feel it. And my answer is always like, no, you know, like, no, you know, but that's like one of my pet peeves is when people are like, you know, like, you didn't feel like, no, I don't know the difference, you know, like, so, and so, yeah, just to, you know, so she's just kind of like, oh, you know, well, now we have to go get a Plan B pill, you know, like, so really playing it as if like, oh, you know, he's a nice guy. I guess, you know, I just didn't feel it or I didn't see it or, you know, whatever. And then again, later on, you know, I think hearing it from Terry about how guys were, and on a podcast, hearing how different men would plan out these things.
Called stealthing, I think it's called stealthing.
Yeah.
Because he just played a mind fuckery with her, you know, like as afterwards, it's like, yeah, I thought you, oh, okay, so, oh, no, sorry. And she's all confused, like, and then later she gets clarity, much clarity, you know. But even thinking about that, like you just see it's about consent throughout, like these different ideas or instances of how we grapple with or understand consent. Really interesting. And then
I was sorry,
go ahead.
before you say that, like, I'm also thinking about like the educational piece, like too. People don't teach us these things until, and then we learn about it later on. But if we were taught that ahead of time, hey, this is what it looks like. Here's a scenario. This is what, you know, non-consent looks like. This is what a consent violation looks like. If we had that, we'd be able to recognize it better, more, and, you know, really call people out on their shit if they try some shit like that, you know?
Yeah, and I would say like even still too, yeah, the education piece, absolutely. And the thinking about like, where do we begin to talk about these conversations, right? And so this is where I think of like at the Heal Project, it is, we start talking about this when, from birth to crossing over is what we usually say. And so people are usually like, wow, I got to talk to our kids about, you know, spiking drinks and this and that. And I was like, well, not necessarily, because throughout this whole show, what we're seeing is the issue of consent coming up consistently, right, in different ways. And consent can come up in a variety of ways that does not have to include sex. So consent, how do we teach consent to young people? I mean, really teach it, because we verbally say things, but then we as adults have complete and total control over young people. So we say one thing and do another. So they contradict themselves consistently. And so learning about consent, bodily autonomy, but also just like really, and I say simple stuff, but like how to be a good friend, right? how do you show up as a friend? And even in the show, like how those three showed up for each other, there was a moment of where they struggled, but they came back to a place, right? So like, what is it with your people or your best friend? What makes them your friend? Are things unsaid, or are they very clear? Like how how is being a good friend a good friend? We have these arbitrary ways of saying being a good person, right? And that's not enough, you know? And so it's like teaching children about, I don't know how to, I bring this up a lot because Mia Mingus does a workshop on this, how to give a good apology. Like
Mm,
that's really, really vital, like work, how to give a good apology. That's communication skills. That's
right.
about sharing emotions and being like emotionally, working on emotional intelligence, right? So these are the skills that lead to the things that hold very firmly how to make, you know, good decisions on things, or even how to think critically about things, right? So
Mhm.
to me, like this whole show is, you know, like an insight into Michaela's horrible experience, but through that, she really teaches us a lot of stuff. And the finale, what did you think about the finale?
Oh my goodness gracious. You know,
I
the
had
vengeful person
thought.
in me, the vengeful person in me really loved the first one, the first
Uh-huh.
trial. I, you know, but I actually, I really liked it. You know, it definitely kept me wanting more.
Mm-hmm.
It showed me like how people are, you know, my you know, vision, how they envision something happening, right, over and over, what to do differently, how would this happen. And so that was really like, you know, I liked that. I liked like going through the scenarios. But yeah, that first vision definitely had me like, you know,
Mm-hmm.
angry and like, yes, and, you know, all the things, or, you know, happy, but like, you know, like totally vengeful, like totally mean. Um, but yeah, I thought I was just, it was almost unsettling too, right?
Yeah.
Like unsettling in the sense of like, oh, there is no resolution,
Huh.
you
Well, you
know?
know, it is, I like, part of me liked that it was unsettling because that's the reality sometimes, right? And we don't have a nice, like, you know, happy ending. But then to me, it was, yes, different scenarios and how she could have dealt with it. But within those different scenarios, you noticed that one is about, it's almost like she's working through stuff. One is like rage, confusion, acceptance at the end, you know, almost going through stages of stuff. It also shows that these are different avenues that people can look at. It also shows that there's the complexity in characters, right? Because they change who
Yeah.
does what and how you see him and how you see her. It always shifts, right? I thought that was fucking beautiful because it can happen that way. You know, it can, and it's complicated. And so we grapple with those memories and those ideas and those visions, or, you know, all of that. I think she did a freaking excellent job, and I wish that there would have been more to talk about. I think it would have been a great opportunity to actually do a show about like how to navigate consent in the world as a Black person, a queer person, you know, like all of that. That would have been amazing. And thinking about the you know, the scene, or in instances where people get drugged when they're
Uh,
out in clubs, it makes me reminds me of when Mandy was young, and how when she started going out to clubs and stuff, we literally had a mantra. And so this is one way that you can really talk to your kids about this, because like we were talking about it explicitly and honestly. We talked about, you know, people getting roofied and, you know, still having a good time, but being aware and knowing that she will be drinking and all of these things. And so we came up with plans. We always had a plan. So I was like, okay, what do you do? Every time she left, I was like, what do you do tonight? She was like, never leave a girl behind, always go to the bathroom in a pack, never leave my drink alone or covered or behind the you know, like always leave it with somebody. We had like 6 or 7 things that we would go through. And I was like, you know, never go home alone, never ever leave your friend behind. I don't care if she got dick, you do not leave your friend behind. You know, so it's like we came up with like clear things that made me feel really safe, and made her feel empowered. And thank goodness it was something that really worked for us, you know.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
Things can happen, you know.
Yeah, I think that's super, super important, developing a safety plan. I think it's so, so necessary. I remember I went out one time and, you know, I saw this woman really drunk, and she was she was surrounded by like 10 guys, and they were like, let me take you home. They were like pulling on her. Let me take you home. Let me take you home. I was like, nobody is taking her home. She was a stranger to me, but I was like, I cannot let you go home by yourself. I got her, pulled her, like put her in my car, took her to my house. I had no idea who she was, anything, put her on my couch, and just like hopefully, you know, she slept it off. But it was the most disturbing thing to see that, you know, all of these guys just after her, and like, you know, it was I don't even know. I was just kind of appalled. Like, just, you know, it's not like it didn't feel like any one of these guys wanted to protect her, you know, like it was very bizarre.
And I have been in that same situation a variety of times where I have been in clubs, and I notice as the club is starting to close and people are leaving, you see, you know, people that stay around to have that last drink, or they know the bartender. And it's funny because that's when I usually watch. I really do watch, because I have seen people come in just to pick up the people who are staggering and falling all over the place. And so I saw it happen right in front of my eyes. This woman could not even speak or could not stand up straight. And this guy was just like there talking to her, trying to pick her up to take her. I went to the bartender. I said, this person does not know that woman. He just walked in. She is really drunk. I was like, oh, what are you going to do? You know, I was like, your bar, and this is your responsibility. Do not let her go with that man. You know, so I have done that several times to stop.
Yeah.
It's like, there's so many things to talk about there. Like the fact that people actually look for that it is, you know, like exciting to them, that they want to harm.
Yeah.
Not
But I think
consent,
it's so, yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think it's really amazing of you to do that and to reiterate it every single time, because you need that reminder, you know, like people need that reminder. I just did a talk for NYU's West, their women's group, and like, you know, we talked about developing a safety plan. I talked about what you called don't leave your friend behind, or whatever. Like I call it like sort of a tether or yo-yo, you know, like making sure you're checking in, and but just really thinking thoroughly about. And it's sad that we have to think like this, but unfortunately there are evil people in the world. There are those people who are going to come in and want to take advantage of people. So it's like you have to do the best you can to protect yourself, you know? So,
well,
yeah.
I will do a slight edit in that. And it's like, there are people who do evil things in the world, because when we do it, when we say people are evil, then it's almost like we create this barrier between them and us. And really, most sexual assaults are people that are in our circle.
True.
Are in circle, you know.
That's right.
So it creates this thing like stranger danger, you know.
Right.
And
That's right.
a lot of the stuff is about us and, you know, the people around us. It could be about lack of communication, consent. It could be about, you know, there's a variety of things that could happen. And so, you know, I keep going back to the most foundational and strongest things here is like this how we relate to one another. What are connections and intimacy? How are you a friend? How do you see potential danger? How do you speak up, you know, without fear? Like all of those things are the things that I see as how we get to being strong and knowledgeable and feeling powerful, to be able to have the words, you know, to be able to speak, to say something, to question, to be like, that doesn't seem right, you know, and I need to talk to somebody about that because, you know, and I think this show did a really, really wonderful job on that. I like commend her. I love this actress so much, and I'm so happy that she shared her story with us and that we can learn from this story. Yes, and I'm still thinking about all the other messages here about relationship structures, about
I was thinking about the doxing piece too, like that
the
whole
which.
thing. Doxing was a where you reveal where the perpetrator like lives or their personal information.
Oh, right.
Like really trying to think through that piece of it, because yeah, like the mean part of me is like, yeah, reveal that information, and then like, you know, like, but it's like morally or ethically, you know, it's not congruent, right? So it's one of those things that's like
Hard part. That's really difficult. It's really hard sometimes to separate on those things when trauma is there, and that brings up, you know, that conversation about like sometimes we put healing and justice together, and I think sometimes they can be together, but sometimes they're very separate. So because we often see or talk about in this country as healing and justice as going through the criminal justice system. Maybe for some people that might work, for many more it doesn't. And so and that justice doesn't often give healing, right? So in this piece, you know, I see I was trying to think about what was her healing and what was like the justice that she got. And I really think that the healing was, I think it was like really about the connection she had to her people and the conversations and really getting to a space of naming what happened. But the justice for me was when she got to call those motherfuckers out, when she said it out loud in a crowd of people that heard everything. Like that was her justice. And it was like putting it out there. Even the guy who took the condom off, she fucking said it right there. Um, that was powerful. And I think for her, that was exactly what she needed, because she was trying to give this speech and it's like, it's almost like everything colliding all at once. And she's like, bam, I gotta just get this out. So I think that was, in some part, that was her, or at least the beginning of her justice. And
yeah.
healing too.
Yeah, you know, one thing we actually didn't talk about was the guy, the Italian guy.
Oh
Um,
yeah, Berzaggio, or something like this. I forgot his name.
the name. But thinking about like trying to find him or trying to, it felt like she wanted him for protection almost, you know, like trying to find some sort of comfort or support or protection
Right.
that she couldn't necessarily find maybe in her friendships.
Mm-hmm.
um and that felt, that whole situation was just like a, what is
And
happening, what is going on, but
blame that he put onto her for being raped. Like he put blame onto her. Like
mhm.
yeah. So
Oh
that
yeah,
yeah that
that's
was.
right, yeah, yeah.
But also too, like in terms of like being a bad survivor, another thing was that showing her continuing being a sexual being
Yes.
after full assault. I thought that was beautiful because For some of us, for some people, no, absolutely not. No sex. There's a real big disconnect. And there are others that no, there isn't. And that they can still try to find comfort, intimacy, pleasure, and desire elsewhere. And I really like that. I really like that they still showed her being, trying to live life and trying to be a sexual being in spite of what had happened. So that's just another piece as well.
Yeah, I like that too. And I think that's a part of the healing piece too.
Yes.
You know, it's like the sexual healing, the sexual aspect of healing. So yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Oh,
So many things,
wish,
so many elements, you
I
know.
know there's way more. I know there's way more.
Right.
It was just so, yeah, it was just really, really well made because of the complexity. It wasn't simple. It
Mm-hmm.
wasn't simple. And then to think about, and it really bleeds into like all of our lives in that it just like it talked about, you know, racism. It talked about sexual violence to a woman and a man. Um, and really speaks to like, yeah, again, I keep going back to relationships, connections, what we need from one another and what we actually learn from ourselves. So that's what I keep imploring people to do. This holistic sexuality is really this giant thing about how we come into us and how we share ourselves with others, understand one another. Yeah. We're in a
Mm-hmm.
different world now. Who knows what's going to come, especially with all the things that we're pushing for, like defund the police and, you know, all of these movements that are happening simultaneously. And so with these things do come to fruition, how are we relating to one another? How are we holding one another?
Yes. Oof.
How are we communicating with one another? That is the long haul work. Not easy, but so fucking worth it. So start with the kids early on. That's what I say. Start with the kids from birth to crossing over, talking about this. If you haven't seen I May Destroy You, even though you've listened to our talk about it, see it anyway. It's beautifully made. Michaela is just fantastical, and check out Chewing Gum as well. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, or anything you want to add to this conversation, please let us know. We are Healed to End on all social media platforms. Do you want to give your website and info again before we get off?
Yeah, sure. You can find me at velvetlipssexed.com or sexdownsouth.com. And you can find me on social media at the #1 Marla Stewart or Velvet Lips Sex Ed without the E. So sex without the E.
All right, everyone. Thank you. This was Connecting the Dots. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.